Hey, it's Nate.
Hey, it's Barry.
Hey, it's Brian.
Welcome back to the Collecti-Bros podcast. Today's episode is another episode of our mainline series, Is It Worth It? Topic at hand being Golden Axe, the Duel. Before we begin though, please entertain us. We aren't begging, but we ask you kindly.
We're begging.
I'm e-begging, bro.
I'm on my knees.
I'm just making a declarative statement. We're not begging. If you mind checking us out on any applicable social media platforms as follows.
My goodness. It sounds like a demand now. These are hostage negotiation demands.
Twitter, it's the one with the bird. Facebook, the Book of Faces. Instagram, TikTok. We're on Buzzsprout, but we got a little special one to talk about. If you go to our Buzzsprout page, there's a link to our Discord that Barry's been working very hard on.
It's also going to be in the episode notes.
And I'm trying to learn how to use it. So on to the story of Golden Axe, the Duel.
Do you want to give us the back?
Yeah, you gave it
The whole spiel?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't mean I see why you're saying that. I didn't mean like the story. I meant like
Boy.
The overview?
an overview of Golden Axe, the Duel. So this game was developed and published by Sega. Development was specifically handled by Sega AM1, legendary arcade producers of Sega. Collecti-Bros favorites such as House of the Dead, previous episode Die Hard Arcade. And Brian, do you know the other big one they did?
I don't.
Sonic.
It's a huge one.
Oh, Sega Bass Fishing.
Absolutely.
Hey.
It's like when you have a button, this one's huge, but...
That's how much I know about Sega, so...
Legendary Arcade Development Center for Sega, they have so much experience, and it's starting way back in the early days, but carrying it all the way through. So this is an arcade game designed in mind that we happen to get on the Saturn. Published by Sega, as previously said. They handled their own stuff back then, especially their own properties. But timeline, Japan obviously going to get it a little sooner than us. They got it in 1995 in arcades, and they got it in 1995 on the Saturn. We got it in the middle of the year in June 96. The arcade and the Saturn games are pretty much identical ports, similar to the other arcade ports for the Saturn. That was a big selling point of the Saturn was, hey, this is arcade quality at home. This game delivers on that front as well. So, if anyone else knows the previous Golden Axe games, they are known as some of the mainline beat-em-up games of all time, really. Especially when you think Sega, this was the first co-op 16-bit game ever made, was the first Golden Axe. So, it's a pretty big franchise. I know it's dormant now, but when it came out, it was quite a big deal.
Wasn't Golden Axe a pack-in for the Genesis?
There were, I believe, some pack-ins. I don't think all Genesis had it as a pack-in, but there were bundles that had pack-ins.
Golden Axe 2?
Altered Beast is like the
Altered
main-
Beast.
Oh, I'm thinking of Altered Beast.
Yeah,
okay.
similar time. It came out at similar time. It was basically a launch game if it wasn't a launch game. It was literally the first game you could co-op on 16-bit. So, yeah, it was a big deal. Everyone that had a Sega or knew someone that had a Sega probably had a Golden Axe game they played. But it's actually a really long-running series. It started off in Master System and went all the way through Genesis, and here we are on the Saturn playing a fighting game, which is kind of different for them. It's not the first time they've not done a beat 'em up. That was actually on the Master System. They have the Zelda clone. I forget the name all of a sudden.
Warrior.
Golden, yeah, which that's an expensive game I'd love to own someday, but this is the first time they actually did a fighting game. Now, this is during the middle of the 90s. You got to think Street Fighter 2 or post Street Fighter the movie. Fighting games are at an all-time high. Sega already had Virtua Fighter. They didn't really have a 2D fighter they wanted to push out. And there were still people that weren't 100% sold on 3D fighters. So the 2D fighters were still doing extremely well at the time. The solution was, we already have Golden Axe. We're not doing anything with it. Give it to AM1. Let's make it quickly, as fast as possible to cash in on the success of Street Fighter. So we got Golden Axe, the Duel out of that. Now, as far as development goes, there's not a whole lot of drama with it. Surprisingly, a lot of these games, there's crunches, and there's not really a lot that came out because it was actually a pretty efficient process. We knew what we were doing. It's a very competent studio. It came and went without kind of a hiccup. The drama with this game is more with the reception and the attempt of, people call it a cash grab, people call it kind of just too talented of a studio to be bare bones as it is, but nothing controversial with the development of this game, surprisingly. So yeah, as far as story goes in this game, it's a Golden Axe game. So guess what? Death Adder's back. He's pissed. He wants his axe. You gotta stop him. The difference with this one, it's a fighting game. So the story kind of comes from your individual characters. There is an arcade mode, so everyone has their own ending cinematic. It's pretty brief, as it was at the time. But the story's gonna more come from like each individual character's motivations for wanting the axe, or why they're on this ass-kicking fest to find the Golden Axe. But while we're talking about the characters, one thing of note, you hear a Golden Axe fighting game, you would kind of assume like, oh, it's going to be all the characters you could pick from the past Golden Axe games in a fighting game. No. The only returning character from this franchise is actually Death Adder, who's like the Darth Vader of this franchise. He's the main big baddie all throughout it. He's actually a playable character for the first time on here, which is pretty cool. I immediately gravitated towards him. Everyone else is either like a descendant of a character you would know or love, or just parts picked from him. Like, hey, this boss has there's a child that has like a skin of one of the baddies you fight in a Golden Axe beat 'em up game. So there's not actual like any character other than Death Adder that was in a previous Golden Axe game.
I'll be the guy. Spoil it, and the axe returns.
Yes, the Golden Axe is actually the main boss of this game. Apparently, they never really go into too much detail during the beat 'em up era of like why this axe was magical or what it could do. But you find out there's like a god being living inside this axe, and when you beat Death Adder in this game, the last boss is the axe in like a golden armor, and it's named G-Axe.
Golden's just too long to put on the script, I guess.
Maybe the god's name's Gary or Greg. Gregory Axe. Maybe.
I was trying to think of George. I was trying to think of other
George.
two names.
George. Jeff. Jeff with a J. Jeff with a G.
Geef.
Geoff.
Geoff.
Damn it.
Geoff.
Beat me to Geoff.
So there's not a ton of characters in this game. In this era, there wasn't like 40 character selections yet, like Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I think there's 10 on here. Is that how much there was?
Sounds right. 8 to 10 in that kind of realm.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, confidently unsure, but there's 10. There is 10.
Are we including Jeff?
That's not including Jeff Axe.
Okay.
Jeff Axe would be 11. He's not playable, so I didn't include him.
That's unfortunate. I always appreciate in fighting games when they have the boss unlockable, he's
Secret
playable,
character,
and he's always 100 times worse than when you're fighting him. Like, he kicks your ass when you're fighting him, but
you can't use him when he's like garbage.
Right.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to be able to actually be him. I agree with that. It's always a nice little touch.
Hey, shout out to this game, too, for not reusing sprite animations. That was a thing at the time where they would literally just have two characters that were almost identical with different sprites.
Scorpion and Sub-Zero.
Right. Yeah, they're all very unique.
I think that's one thing I will say about having a smaller roster. You can put a little more like TLC into it.
Yeah.
But we'll go down the roster really quick and kind of share some of their individual motivations just to kind of beef out the story part a little bit. Start with my favorite character, Death Adder. Like I said earlier, he's the big baddie of the series. He just wants the axe to like take over the land, rule it. Think of Darth Vader. He's the big baddie. It's pretty straightforward motivation there.
I mean,
Plus,
he's
jacked.
clearly inspired by Death Dealer from Frazetta. So.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of information about the development of the original Golden Axe games and their their art direction. They said, hey, we want Lord of the Rings meets, why'd my brain just, Conan the Barbarian. And I think they accomplished that like pretty well with this game. Funnily enough, they also said they want Magic like Dragon Quest, which is kind of funny also, but which they end up getting as well. So yeah, very much like Conan, Barbarian style. That's the world of Golden Axe. So very much a Death Dealer homage. So we have Kane Blade, who is most similar, if you guys have played the original Golden Axe games, to the Barbarian character. He's of the same tribe. He's not, unfortunately, the same character you play as in the first 3 Golden Axe beat 'em up games.
Pretty sure his clothing got passed down.
I mean, it's a tribe thing, man. It's how the warriors dress, but
Bright blue.
they're a
One
tribe
day.
that uses fire magic. So Cane Blade has like a fire spell he can cast. His motivations are basically protect his tribe, similar to Exo Man of War. Next, we have Milan
Ma'am.
Milan Flare. She is actually a direct descendant of the original Golden Axe character that she has. Not fire magic in this one, though, or water magic. If you remember, if you played the original Golden Axe, you can summon a big old dragon with your max spell. She has wind powers, which aren't as cool. But in a fighting game, it's very fast and fluid. She wants the axe to protect her kingdom, too, and to keep peace and prosperity, as her ancestors did. Which brings us to the last character that's kind of based off the original Golden Axe characters. And that would be Gilius Rockhead. He's a direct descendant of Gilius Thunderhead, who, in the other Golden Axe games, me and Brian's dudes, who we always kind of fought over because he's a dwarf and he's got a big-ass axe. So if you guys have played Death Adder, which is like the arcade-only Golden Axe, Gilius Thunderhead's the one who actually kills Death Adder at the end and kind of... It's the one that predates this game. This game takes 80 years after Death Adder. So Gillian's like the big hero, and you're his descendant, and you're trying to establish yourself as a hero of the dwarves also without living in your ancestor's name. So his whole motivations to get the axe is to prove himself and keep the world safe, which is kind of a reoccurring thing with these three original characters, but they're based off the characters you know and love from Golden Axe. So all the other ones are pretty much original, which kind of impressive that most of them don't look out of place. They look like they belong for the most part. I think there's a few exceptions. Exceptions.
A few of them look like carbon copies from some other games.
Yes.
Heavily inspired, as I think they say.
Yeah.
I will say one that we all really enjoyed playing as was Zoma. And Barry knows him affectionately as Frog Guy.
Yeah, yep. He was my guy. The cheapest one.
So he's the main rival of Cane Blade. He was been in King's Courts and stuff, but they're basically like, dude, you too selfish and crazy for us. They kicked him out. So he heard the Golden Axe was back. He wants it for purely selfish motivations. He wants more power. It's like a sorcerer. Think of like an evil Merlin. But he's blue.
He's got patience.
He's
Or
like
green.
if you made Hobgoblin / Screen Goblin, threw him in medieval times, and then he doesn't have anything except magic powers and potions. That's what he looks
Patience.
like.
Can wait 100 years for that shit to solidify.
And he can turn you into a frog.
Yeah.
But what I like about specifically, it's cool that they have a good mix of good guys and bad guys to play as in this game. Like, he's clearly a bad guy character.
Who are the bad guys? Him and Death Adder.
Death Adder, Zuma.
That's it.
That's all I can remember.
Yeah, those are really it, I guess.
I mean, I thought Green was a
Doc-
bad guy, but
yeah,
he's not.
Yeah, there's some that you look
Got
at
us.
it.
They small soldiered us, bro.
It's cool that you can play as bad guys, though. It's the first time in the franchise you can actually play as any sort of bad guys. We have Keel, which this one, to me...
Okay, he was kind of a bad guy at first.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I would have really liked his backstory fleshed out a little more
He
because,
was like an elf.
he like doesn't really fit into the whole Golden Axe universe, but he looked freaking awesome. Freaking.
Where's do you have where's
The
your
manual?
bag? Yeah, I wanted to pull it out
Sure,
real
yeah.
quick.
I'm just doing like brief descriptions because the manual's actually pretty like decently. So he gets. Wow, I shouldn't have this popping in the background as I'm doing this. Wait.
You should be like, oh boy, at the bottle and just wait.
Thank you.
So his motivations are kind of purely selfish. He awakens from being frozen in his ice, and he thinks his own people did it to him. So he wants the axe to kind of take revenge, and that's really all I can get about. He's on a bloodlust, basically. So he kind of starts off as a bad guy. When you beat it, his cinematic is basically like the axe restores his conscience back to him, and his blood feuds kind of subside, and he feels himself again. So, and then there's a weird scene with his sister that's suggestive but not suggestive.
He's no Mr. Mime.
He's no Mr. Mime. I wish that was one story I wish would have been fleshed out a little more. And fighting games, I get it's hard to do. I understand that.
Yeah, really, this is kind of typical for fighting games. You get like a, one or two slides. This was for the time. Tekken's the first one that really kind of attempted to flesh it out more with like a FMV.
I mean, that's kind of how games were in this era. Is like if you wanted to know anything about the story that they didn't have time to put in, like you had to consult the manual.
The what?
The manual.
Oh, I'm sorry. Modern games. I don't know what that is. My bad.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was just like staring at you like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? So especially with this one, like a lot of the important information about the characters is really in the manual. Because I mean, the game is all about fighting. I mean, you get the epilogues or whatnot, but the real like character stories are in here, and it kind of gives you a little synopsis. But like you're saying, Keel's story does sound interesting, and I wish there was a supplement of some kind to get to know some of these other characters.
So then we have Doc. Doc is a healer on an island, and he ends up finding out about the golden axe, and he's like, I want to take it to cure all diseases. And his home people are kind of mixed feelings about him because they're like, we need you here healing us. We don't know how to receive you because you basically abandoned your post. And according to the book, the manual, it's the first person to ever quit the College of Healing. So he basically dropped his sacred duty to go do this. So people have mixed feelings if he's good or bad or chaotic neutral or whatever.
Selfless.
I will say, I thought Doc would have been interesting, but he was by far my most boring character.
Yeah.
Like going into this game, I was really excited to pick him because like, he's kind of like mysterious and cool, and he looked pretty BA.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed with Doc.
And then we played as him, and I was like,
Even
this is
Super
it?
is the most lackluster.
Yeah, Super is the most lackluster, but that's beside the point. He's just the least interesting.
Just standard white guy.
So hang in there, we got 3 left. Next up's Jam. She's a little girl that was raised by the Daggers. You actually fight them, and I believe it's the second or third Golden Axe game, which is pretty cool. It's like a saber-toothed tiger cat god, but her whole intention is to get the axe to resurrect him because she got abandoned by her people, and she was raised by them. So her, as a thank you, wants to reanimate.
I will exclude this if it's not true. I'm gonna go look back, but I think there is I'm not sure if it's a translation problem in the game, but I remember when we were watching the end credits for Jam's scene,
Yes.
switched the pronouns.
Yep.
And it turned into his quest, and I got really confused.
It did, because it was weird.
It did?
I want to say it did. There was something on a name change or something where I said, wait, what?
Yeah, I need to go back and check it again.
Yeah, we'll check it again.
If you're listening to this in the podcast, I'm right. But it switched over. It was like, because at the end of it, Jam's like, I can't bring my dude back to life. I guess I understood the source of, or the true meaning of my quest, but it was worded, it was like, understood the true meaning of his quest.
I don't know if they're talking about like the god or like, you know what I mean?
Or, the god. He's like a ghost. He's kind of like a god.
Yeah,
right?
He was before, but he died.
Mufasa. Up in the stars.
Yeah, Mufasa. The character Jam, or that weird little like water bear thing they were writing.
Oh, yeah.
So I was just like, wait, what happened? So I'm gonna, if it is that case, I'm just gonna credit to translation because that happens so frequently between Japanese to English.
See our last episode on Bubble Bobble for a great example.
Yeah.
It was just a worth mentioning, interesting
For sure.
bit.
We have Pankos. How do you say his name, Barry?
Panchos, I'm guessing.
We have Pankos. That's what we're going to go with. If not, I'm sorry. He's basically the son of an inventor. He's an inventor scientist himself, and he wants to go next to further his scientific studies. He wears armor that's similar to like some of the mini bosses in the first Golden Axe game. It's kind of like a little tip of the cap to them. He throws bombs. He has like explosives he can issue out. So kind of like more modern stuff compared to swords and spells.
He looks coded as a villain.
Yeah, but he's
He looks
not.
like Louis
No,
Anderson.
he's not.
I gotta even say he's wearing armor from the original Golden Axe. They were like mini bosses you to fight.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So-
Yeah, I thought when I saw him for the first time, I said, "Oh, he's one of the bad guys." He's got bombs, and
Right.
he's like
Nobody
his
good's got
design
bombs,
kind
bro.
of looks like one of those sub bosses you'd fight in something else.
Yeah. With
But-
the Louis Anderson face.
Nope, he's a family man.
Last but not very least, we have Green. So
Shrek.
Swamp Thing.
Shrek.
Blanca from
Shrek
Street
thing.
Fighter,
Shrek.
straight up ripoff.
Yep.
Like, they weren't even trying to be cute
Yep.
with hiding it. His whole story I'm kind of confused on because it sounds like he used to be human, and then he got turned to like a half plant, half man
Shrek.
monster. So
He lives in the continent's forests, the swamps. Shrek.
My swamp.
Shrek thing. But Death Adder wiped out his people, so he's the last of his kind, is what I've read also, which is weird since he used to be human. So
It says he's half human, half plant race.
Yeah.
So he didn't used to be a human.
Okay. He has like a human chick and a human baby that he somehow reproduces.
You don't know.
Yeah.
She's covered up. You just saw the goods, bro.
But Death Adder's army killed his people, so he wants like pure bloody revenge against them. But he also wants to go home back to his family. So
that lives in a house.
He wants the axe to carry out his John Wick style revenge mission. So
no,
and transform himself back, right?
No, he's a half human, half plant race. He was never transformed.
Okay.
Now this lady named Maria helped him escape Death Adder's clutches. Maria disappeared after freeing Green. He heard she's alive, and now he wants the axe to turn into a human so he can be with Maria.
Okay.
Shrek.
Literally.
So he's stalking Maria at the end.
Yes.
Wow.
And Maria's got a kid.
Turn.
Yeah.
The video makes it look like it's all his.
No.
They small soldiered us again.
Yep. So
he might be a bad guy. That's creepy.
Yeah, he gets rescued and then is just infatuated with this woman, so much so that he
you saw
wants to be a human.
That always ends healthily.
Be with her.
I'll let y'all decide if he's a bad guy or a good guy, because I'm skeptical after that.
Anybody creeping in windows except for Spawn.
That is all 10 characters' motivations for acquiring the Golden Axe and Golden Axe of Duel. Thank you for sitting through that. We can move on to the fun part now, gameplay.
Although I will note his initial goal was to kill Death Adder. Maria was a bonus.
Yeah, she was.
Brian, how about you talk about the gameplay a little bit? You and I have a decent amount of fighting game experience. I wouldn't call either one of us like masters of the craft, but we've played a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm not self-proclaimed or anything. I will say this, like this era of fighting games, I really appreciate where it was like kind of stuck in the arcades to get that true 2D experience. This one's heavily inspired by Samurai Showdown, another favorite of mine.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, even the character designs and the animated backgrounds and the way that the camera pans in and out, like this is almost a Samurai Showdown clone without, and again, we didn't sit here and play it for, they have like 20 Samurai Showdown games. This is the one we got, so I don't want to say without the technicality, but also I'm way more familiar with Samurai Showdown than I am with this. But even the camera zooms in and out. You can bounce off the screen, kind of a la Gambit, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for more modern reference. Everybody's got weapons. This is definitely the heart and soul of Samurai Showdown.
Yeah, I think literally someone at Sega probably played Samurai Showdown was like, make this, because literally as soon as we turned it on, Brian, without even knowing like that was a thing going in, was like, this looks like Samurai Showdown. I said, yep.
Well, yeah, initially,
kind of the common.
I didn't know a lot about this game. I had preconceived notions that it wasn't great, but I was under the impression it was a 3D fighter also, and I was very pleasantly surprised that it was not. It's your typical, highly animated sprite, large sprites, 2D side-by-side parallel fighter, which is awesome. Yeah, great.
As far as gameplay goes, this is a pretty straightforward fighter. There is a few things that make it Golden Axe and kind of make it stand out a little bit. So this is shortly following where power bars were kind of a staple in fighting games. They were already pretty much in all of them at the time. Key difference with this one, so you guys have played previous Golden Axe games, there's the in-between levels when you're in your camp. The little elves steal your stuff, your potions, and you gotta go kick them or hit them with your weapons. They drop your stuff. So while you're fighting in this game, little sack goblins come back, and you have to hit them to pick up potions. Once you grab, was it 5 or 6?
I think it was 5.
5?
5 of the potions.
You activate your hyper attack by having those 5, and it's a little bar that shrinks down, and you have an input a short amount of time to enter.
No, you have to go into your magic power-up mode first, and then you
activate it.
Use your super attack.
And I think you're invincible during that time also, right?
I noticed when it was doing, maybe. When you hit, so you have to hit A, B, and C, or X, Y, and Z all at the same time in order to activate your magic power-up. And during the animation, when like the potions come out and swirl around and you're flashing, during the animation you're invulnerable.
That's good.
Yeah. The summon.
Could you imagine Just like popping it and just spamming with like, some of
cancels.
these moves. Yeah.
They're just like, oh, activate the power attack, and they just hit you with a low kick and cancel it.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a little creative of a way to get the power meter, magic meter, whatever you want to call it, into a fighting game, but make it still feel like Golden Axe. Like, I'll give them big kudos for that.
Definitely. Yeah, I appreciate it too. And then really there wasn't a lot of other fighting games that kind of had that mechanic at the time. Marvel vs. Capcom was a little later. But
you still had like your power meters in Alpha and stuff.
Right.
Alpha
yeah,
came out the same year as
charge, or you had to block or survive, and it would go up by time. So having the player effect, having to grab those is pretty cool. And yeah, like you were saying, making it feel like Golden Axe. This, in a weird way, this wasn't just like a throwaway title. They actually tried to make it feel like Golden Axe, and I can appreciate that.
It's funny reading like reviews of the time for this game. The biggest criticism was the actual power meter. And to me, like playing it, I was like, first thing has got to be the input of the special moves, right? Because Barry, like they're pretty difficult, right?
They're garbage.
Yeah, like we really all wanted to see them, but we got one to work and one to work against us, and that's about it. We had to go watch a YouTube video to like watch them. But no, people were complaining about the mechanic of having to grab the potions and stuff, and how it was too distracting from actually fighting.
I would agree with that, actually. Because of the kind of fighter it is, it doesn't give you any wiggle room for mistakes. It's one of those where it's like you have to put an exact button input to do a certain move. It's not like the stuff now where it has like quality of life, where you just jam one button and it does an auto combo for you. Like this era of fighters, especially with Street Fighter, and this is why I don't like playing them, because they're just too complicated for me. I'm a simple man with simple needs, but this era was like you have to do very specific button combinations. You have to pay attention to what your enemy is doing, like if you have to block high or block low or jump out of the way so they don't get turned into a frog. And in the middle of all of that high pace, I have to worry about a little elf dropping potions. And half the time I didn't worry about him because I'd accidentally hit him or the enemy would accidentally hit them. But then the green one, where it would drop vitality, it was like, it's not going to happen. Because the time that I'm going to go try to get a piece of meat off the ground, my enemy's going to hit me 4 times and it's going to be wasted. So I think the implementation of items as a supplement to a power bar is really interesting. I just don't think it was executed super well. I don't know.
I feel like it works far better in versus than against a computer, because 2 human beings see that thing of meat or those potions, they're going to kind of stop what they're doing and instinctively go for them. Computer's like, I'm gonna fight you up. See, look at that.
I get your argument, Barry. I think it kind of depends on which character you select, because some of them are very mobile, and you can even bounce off the screen, which, catapults you across. But yeah, there is a slight distraction of it, but I feel like overall it adds to it. I appreciate the effort.
We also played Golden Axe previously, so
yeah,
we might appreciate it more than the actual mechanics worth, because we're like, oh, I can't believe they got that in there. It's so cool.
Yeah,
no, I think it's interesting. I can't think of another fighter like this that has a system like this.
The only one I can think of is Marvel superheroes with like the Infinity Stones. But even then, it's different because it's a different power every time, right? So that game, you can either get the slowdown or you can get higher damage.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same move, so it is a little different. You're basically filling up the meter with the pickups instead of just getting the move, and you do the input and you can use it. So it is different. It's very unique.
I don't know. Part of me wants to is like, it was hard because I don't know, an elf would drop and your enemy might have kicked him, and then the potions are at the feet of the enemy. So I have to engage the enemy to try and get these potions, but I know for a fact if I go in, I'm getting my booty spanked.
And we probably won't even get the input in for the move we're trying to do anyways.
Yeah,
it's definitely easier with some characters too. The faster characters, the dashes are very quick, but the big beefy characters, you ain't gonna reach it.
And maybe it's because we hadn't played it for very long, and I feel like maybe if you were better at the game and were more confident in your combo inputs, it would be different. But I noticed the times that we were more concerned about trying to pick up potions and activate our magic power, we just got whiffed really bad because we're too focused on trying to hit the buttons and not blocking and watching what the enemy is trying to do to dodge. So we ended up just getting, stuck in a corner and half your health bar. You'd get the magic power to go up, but by the time you already figured it out and tried to recover, the stupid dude is slapping you with fireballs into the edge and you can't get out. Because I was too worried about potions. So maybe it's like a leveling or a learning curve kind of thing where, okay, once you've got the basis of the game down and you're confident in your player's ability, then you can start trying to do the more difficult stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of technicality to it. Mm-hmm. And again, any fighter from this era, there's gonna be, and this is the only game in the series, we don't have years and years with it, so I bet there is some room there. Also, I'd be curious to see how it feels with a stick. Like a lot of the fighters back then, like you're saying, very precise movements with your swoops as far as engaging special attacks. So much easier to pull off with a stick.
Even I feel like even on fighters now.
Oh yeah.
I use a D-pad, but the stick like makes more sense to use, like especially when you have to go down like directional, like
precise
directional
movements.
When we were playing it on the Saturn controller, I didn't feel like it was inputting my directional, and I even find it on other consoles. Directional input is so difficult, so maybe that had something to do with it too, and trying to get the feel for the controller because I'm not comfortable with that one, but it might have been a learning curve thing. I just did find it like the game's already so technically specific in your inputs and your combos and your attacks, and then you're going to throw another thing on there I have to worry about. It was a little much.
Yeah, I think the Saturn's a great controller for fighters, like the roundness of the pad and the button layout. But yeah, some of these patterns, I don't mind the swoops. I'm kind of used to that because of Marvel vs. Capcom or whatever. But yeah, some of these would go back and forth and then back the other counterclockwise, and
or that
it's
one,
hard to do with the pad.
The one lady who you had to hold down and then do a swoop and hit another button and then hit down and X to like, it was like a 2.5 part special move.
You're right.
And then to pull off that, like the special move abilities are already so difficult as it is. And then you have to pull it off within your window of your magic power. Once the magic power runs out, you can't use that move anymore.
Yeah.
So I wish I would have felt more rewarded by going after the little elves and getting the potions and getting that magic power up if my attack was easier.
Dedicated button, maybe.
Because you can't use it normally, so you have a chance of maybe using your magic power once of 3 rounds, maybe twice if you can manage to get the potions. But it would have felt more satisfying to go after them, because most of the time I was like, forget it, I'm not even going to benefit from the power up, I'm going to skip trying to focus on those. So maybe if the inputs were a little bit easier for the power move, because you can't even do it normally, it would have felt better, and it would have felt more engaging to go for these items and to want to look for them and to try to look for them and focus on fighting. I was just like, forget them, I'm fighting. Does it make any sense to go after magic power? Because you power up and your attacks weren't even that much stronger.
Yeah.
So what's the benefit?
And it's frustrating specifically because I feel like Brian kind of hinted at it a little bit. The Saturn controller for this type of fighter where you got high, mid, low attacks, perfect controller for it. If you guys don't know, on the right side, 3 buttons on top, 3 buttons on the bottom, punches and kicks, high, mid, low, like perfect layout. It would have been a little nice if these inputs were a little easier to do, so since we have a great controller for this game.
I think it's really a product of the time. Like you're saying, Barry, a dedicated button for specials would have been nice, but that's more of a modern, like you alluded to earlier, it's more of a modern feature, but it would have been beneficial.
Barry, you don't really have a whole lot of experience with Golden Axe or how it's supposed to look.
Nope.
So tell us your initial thoughts on what you thought this game looked like and your initial reaction to it.
I did not think it was going to be a 3D fighter like Brian. I've played Golden Axe before, not this one, and I didn't think it would be a 3D fighter. Saturn wasn't really popular for 3D. Had a couple games, but it wasn't the 3D. That's what we made our console for. Check out our 3D games. I just wasn't expecting the sprites to look so good. I was expecting kind of looking sprites, but they were banging. The sprites were big. They were detailed. The cutscene pixel art was so good. Like some of the shading I'd noticed in the arms was really good. And I was like, wow, how did they do that? This is like some of the best pixel art I've seen in this era. Like even some of the PlayStation 1 pixel art in some of their games, this was so much better than that.
Slick.
It was really good.
Definitely tell it's an arcade game, for sure.
I think the backgrounds were really good, but I got lost sometimes. I don't know if it just needed to differentiate between being too busy or having a slight color difference. I'm not too experienced in fighters of this era, but like the let's say the stage where we had to fight Zoma, is that his name?
Yeah.
Where it was a landscape and it had rocks and it had kind of a sky and a floating island in the back. it was fine. I could see what I was doing and figuring it out, but then you'd have the one where you're fighting in the city by the river and there's dudes on the boats jumping up and it's just so busy that I'd lose like where my character was sometimes because there's other characters right behind you at almost the same size. So it was hard for me to differentiate between like the foreground and the background at times. But
thankfully you couldn't strafe because I could see that being a big problem if you would strafe around and be like, where? But it helped a little bit that it was strictly 2D, but definitely busy backgrounds.
Busy background, and the camera didn't pan up and down when you jumped, right?
It moved
zooms in and out.
It does the weird
does
zoom
in and out.
Samurai Showdown style where your sprite gets smaller but it zooms out.
Because I feel like sometimes when the enemy would jump up, I would lose them.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't track or it wouldn't be zoomed out enough. I have a problem with that in Dragon Ball Fighters that I'm playing right now too. Like you can jump so high, or if you knock a character up into the sky and they recover, you can't even see the character under you. So if I get knocked into the sky and recover, I have to guess where they are under me and try to attack for that. It's interesting. So I kind of felt the same in this where I couldn't track where they were sometimes because they were a smidge too high and you could see like a foot. But it didn't pan up or down or shift, just in and out. But I mean, graphically, I don't have complaints. I thought the sprite introduction on the title screen was really cool because you got to see like the big blown out ones for each character.
I like the insert quarter screen.
Yeah, it was really nice.
That was a highlight. Yeah. Great.
The character select screen's pretty weak though.
Yep.
Yes.
It's pretty weak. And then the fighter versus is I really like that screen too because it's the full model. It's not just like a square with a picture, which a lot of people do. I've noticed they used to do that a lot. I mean, you're thinking old school, like I know it's older than this, but Mortal Kombat did it to where it was just little pictures. But you got the big blown out, like nice. And then it would, the color swaps, it would reflect the color swaps too, which I thought was cool. But the sprites were really impressive. I was really impressed with the graphics in this game. I did not think it was going to be this good.
Yeah, honestly, same. Especially, the only thing I knew about this game going in is that not a lot of people like this game. Pleasantly surprised aesthetically, because again, like I mentioned, I was expecting like a shitty virtual fighter, bunch of triangles making up these characters. But like very well done, highly animated, large sprites that don't add any slowdown. That's another thing. It does feel like an arcade perfect port of this game. So like the argument with Samurai Showdown, especially if you look at like the Genesis or the Super Nintendo version, whenever it pans out, if it pans out on one of the versions it doesn't, it slows down so much where it's like, this is ridiculous. Why even have it zoom out in the first place? But this is so smooth and like everything, even the background stays animated. So it's not like the background stops moving once you zoom out, which is another thing Samurai Showdown did. So very, very impressed with the graphics. Even the characters, they have a lot of personality and like their idle stance, which that's where a lot of developers got lazy. They'd only animate them during the idle stance.
Mm-hmm.
But while you're fighting in this, like there's always something going on. And yeah, I get Barry's argument, like it can get distracting. Like I was checking out the background in some of the levels, and when it does zoom out, you do kind of blend in because like Samurai Showdown, a lot of the characters, the fighting characters are wider. In the background, they'd be like taller. They'd be, they stand out because of like their stance. They're holding a sword or they have the long hair that sticks out. So you could be easily distinguishable which character is yours or which is the opponent versus just something going on in the background. This game didn't do that. There was a couple times where I was trying to jump off the screen, jump around, and it was like, where am I? Not horrible, but it is something to point out.
I feel like there was only a couple stages that it did that too.
Yeah.
There was like the
ones with people.
I like the one that had the weird water ice thing in the forest or something like that. Am I thinking of
it?
It
was the elf guy that was capturing the
I liked that one. There was parts of the ice that were a little bit too much. But overall, I liked that one, or the one where it was Poncho stage. Like, there wasn't really too much going on in the background, but it was still detailed enough to look like a stage.
Yeah, it was like a fiery furnace, and there was like, mechanisms moving around, but no characters.
Yeah, Death Adder stage is really cool.
Yeah.
That one had a sense of depth, and I think that's the difference on where I would get confused, is the stages that had a good sense of depth, I could tell like where I was. I keep referencing the river one, and that's the one I had the most issues with because there was no real depth to it. Because they lined so many characters up right behind you.
Mm-hmm.
There was 3 supposedly areas for that one. Because there was like the foreground you're fighting, and there was the middle of the water, and there's guys on a boat. Then there was a background of that where there was like
a road.
If you guys have ever played the original Golden Axe, the little bird lizard guys that you ride like pulling a cart, running around back and forth in the background. People were reacting to it. People were reacting to you on the water, and people were reacting to you in the area in front of that. So there was like that one had a ton of characters in it.
Yeah,
but it was pretty awesome to see like characters sprinkled in from the original Golden Axe, like monsters and stuff. So I think they did a great job. Everything looked like Golden Axe, even stuff that wasn't in this series before, like ice elves and stuff. It looked like it belonged.
So it felt like the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Which like hats off to make original characters for a game that's not quite the genre we're used to, and still make it feel like it belonged. Like big time hats off. It's not easy to do. So
I'll say this too. A lot of fighting games from this era either looks great or it didn't age well. Like I was pretty impressed with this. It definitely exceeded my expectations. Again, I didn't have a lot of familiarity going in, a lot of negative, but to see like nice, beautiful, I miss like 2D fighters with like hand-drawn art. Like it looks awesome.
Which is like super interesting because if you read reviews of the time, this is following up Revenge of Death Adder, which is, honest to God, as far as beat 'em ups go, it's one of the prettiest beat 'em ups ever made. Like the sprite work was like legendary for that game. So people unfairly compare that to this, and they're like, this isn't doing anything to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't do anything new, but it does look nice. And like I feel like that got lost on people because they wanted like something to push the boundaries. And it's like, listen, not everything needs to do that. I think this game looks great though overall. Like it's very solid, colorful, animation's fluid. Honestly, I don't have anything really, really negative to say about it at all.
Yeah, I agree. My only negative is the character selection screen. But like I said, Barry's right. They do, add a level of effort when they put the whole sprite in there and it actually changes. It's not just a headshot. Like, it's not the most impressive character select screen, but it's not the worst either.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst one by any means. I think it was the weakest one, and then just a couple of the stage getting confusing was the weakest, but I really enjoyed it. Didn't have reskin models, reskin animations. Everyone felt unique to what their attacks were. So
I really appreciate this era of fighting games. This is the kind of era like I grew up playing with Nate. We'd go to like Block Party, like the arcade or whatever, and this is what we'd spend our time playing. And this looks great. I've never seen the arcade cabinet itself, so to finally experience it was kind of cool, man. I miss this era of games, fighting games like this.
I mean, visually, it's more interesting to me than Street Fighter. Yeah. I don't have a nostalgia or a emotional tie to Street Fighter like some people do, but Street Fighter just doesn't. Characters kind of look boring. Stages kind of look boring. I feel the same way about Tekken sometimes, but this one, every single character kind of felt weirdly unique in their own way. They'd have their own special thing. It wasn't just some dude with his fists up with another dude with his fists up, and then you didn't get to know like what kind of fighter they were until you fought with them. And I'm like, all right, that dude over there looking like a sickly goblin with a staff, he's gonna do some weird stuff. Or you've got this classic-looking sword fighter over here. You got this guy with this giant two-handed sword that he's going to be slow and heavy. Like, I don't know. The diversity of those characters, they were so much more interesting than what was popular at the time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad to see that people weren't drawn to it more. And maybe that was a detriment of it being on one console and only in an arcade. So
I'll say this, too. A lot of times you get in a rut where like the heavy characters all feel the same. They might slash vertically or horizontally, but like, yeah, every character was so unique. Even the big guys, like Death Adder felt completely different than the Blob, whatever his name was.
Poncho?
Yeah. Louis Anderson.
Just quick note, the world of Golden Axe is so awesome. Like it's why I've always been drawn to it. It's why I'm a pretty big fan of this franchise. But yeah, they did a great job turning it into a fighting game, making it look still like Golden Axe. So salute. Let's move on to sound, boys. So I don't want to say weak point, but for me specifically, this was kind of the most meh. Everything was serviceable. I feel like we all do have one universal agreement that the stage for Ponchos had horribly annoying music.
It was screeching. Oh man.
I honestly don't even know what they were trying to go for with that one.
It didn't start out horrible, but then like once it gets to the middle where it just turns into like a skipping disc. Yeah, not the best.
But overall, with fighting games, as far as sound design, it's hard to do because you have like your attack sounds, your spell sounds, and then like your stage music. That's really it. And a lot of times, for me personally, it's like, is this going to annoy me or is this just like fit? I feel like everything fits overall except for that one stage song.
Yeah, again, for me, it's hard. Fighting games, it's different. Completely serviceable. There wasn't. I didn't hear any repeat voices, which is another thing you'll get in these games. Again, all the voices match the characters. I didn't feel like it was like this dude's supposed to have a deep voice and he's got Ty or whatever. They did a good job with that. Everything felt like it was in Golden Axe still. There's a couple of homage sounds and a couple of the music that was like the background, so they did a decent job with that.
I think most of the stage music's pretty good.
Really quick, Barry, do you have that website pulled up for the music?
Yeah.
Sick.
I was gonna ask, how do you guys feel about this music compared to other Golden Axe music? Since the composer for this one, this is the only Golden Axe he's ever done.
Yeah.
So like, does it still feel like Golden Axe?
I think so. I think there's especially I don't remember whose song it was. I think it was playing during like the end credit screen after the cinematics played, but it had like the drums and like the almost Conan sound music.
It was probably that dude then.
Yeah.
Not Conan, but he was Conan guy.
That's Golden Axe to me. If it sounds like it could fit in a Conan movie where you have like a little bit of trumpets, but nothing like jazzy.
Cain Blade.
But for sure sounded like Golden Axe. Now, I would have personally liked for it to sound, if we're going from CD quality music from Genesis when I view Golden Axe, I wish there was a bigger jump, but I think everything sounded good overall. Like, the only one that didn't was that one stage. Everything else sounded very serviceable or above average, honestly.
So I don't know exactly how the music programming works, but it looks like he composed and arranged and made the music for the arcade version.
Sure.
And then that music was ported to the Saturn.
Yeah, this is purely arcade game designed.
Okay.
So.
I didn't know if they did a rearrangement or a remake of the music for the chipset in the Saturn, but it looks like they just took it straight from the arcade, which may be why it kind of felt a little weak in some places.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we have to talk about ports, like that's probably the weakest translation over is
Agree.
just the music.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it was bad either. It just wasn't bombastic. But that's the thing with Golden Axe. The music is kind of simple. It just kind of sound like war drums, a little bit of horns, and
that's another thing too. The Genesis. Anytime I think of Genesis music, I always think of like thumpiness or bassness.
Yeah, for sure.
Doesn't really translate to CD music very well.
It's crazy because it's 30. We're in 32-bit almost.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or at least the capability to.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Saturn though. Like 2D games look and play so much better on Saturn than 3D games.
They don't sound great though.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it sounded bad though. It's just a little disappointing for my personal preference. I would like to see a little bigger of a leap.
Mid.
But it looks like his name was Kazuhiko Nagai, maybe, and he was a sound composer, sound designer, and sound programmer for Sega. He also designed the first version of Sega's Genesis sound system, like the sound engine.
Well, he's a legend then.
So, but he doesn't have a big like rap sheet, I guess, if that's the best way to put it. Like, he's done the music for Alien Syndrome, sound programming for Space Harrier 2, arrangement for Altered Beast.
Well then,
music for Altered Beast.
Nice.
Which one's SMS? Sega Master System?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so Master System, Altered Beast, and then an arrangement for Genesis. Sound effects on Phantasy Star 2, music for Ghostbusters Genesis. Apparently he did some work on Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, but he says he doesn't have anything or he doesn't remember doing that.
Huh.
In an interview, Rail Chase Arcade, Radmobile Arcade. So he hasn't really done anything since 2004, and before that was 95, so like
this was right there at the end there.
yeah, he doesn't really do much. Golden Axe was Golden Axe, Sky Target, and then he didn't do anything again until 2004. But it sounds like, from what I can see on his credits, he was a lot more involved in sound design and sound effects than music composition and arrangement.
Yeah.
So he's still credited on quite a few tracks, but Golden Axe, the Duel, was one of the big ones for actual arrangement, and then Ghostbusters was the other big one. But a lot of production history in other games.
That seems on par with like Sega's arcade development at the time was like get it out quick, grab somebody. That makes sense to me, honestly.
Well, Alien Center was in one game too, so they probably like to keep it in the house.
Yeah, working relationship. That makes sense to me.
I mean, there's other stuff on here like Ghouls and Ghosts, Mega Drive, Rambo 3, Rambo 2.
A lot of Mega Drive work. Huh.
Spider-Man the video game, System 32 specifically.
Genesis, yeah.
Wild River, Beast in the Darkness, The Crypt. So, I mean, it's got quite a few other stuff. Okay, it looks like he was I guess he's credited for the composer on the Duel, Saturn, and Arcade. I'm curious if they just
I would assume they just brought it over.
Plopped it in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would assume.
interesting.
So I don't know if this stays in or not. One of the websites I was looking up said that it's slightly altered, but they didn't go into specifics, and it's literally just a Sega fan site, so I'm not sure. Adds even more to the mystery.
I'm sure it's like...
I don't exactly have a cabinet to compare
Right.
side to side.
Right.
Hell, I can't even find a damn picture of it. Found one little clip of the marquee, and that's
I've never
it.
heard anyone talk about the differences or anything. I couldn't really find a whole lot. So if it is, it's got to be so minute.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably just from sounding from here to here and what changes. But overall, there's not a whole lot to talk about for the sound for me. I thought the characters didn't, like, to me, a fighting game, if they don't get annoying when they're grunting and yelling and getting hit, like, you did your job well. And like, they didn't get annoying on here. So that's honestly the most I can say about fighting game sound. Get to the bread and butter, not meat and potatoes of this conversation. Collectability aspect. Let's talk about pricing, right? The US version of the Saturn version of this game, anywhere from $100 to $120 complete. That's not a small number, but it's not a gigantic number for a Sega Saturn exclusive either. Talk about the Japanese version, does have different cover art. It's only $40 to $50. It's extremely affordable. That's what's shipping it over here and everything. As far as scarcity, you tell me. It sold around 50,000. As far as Barry and I could find out, it's just for Japan numbers. That wasn't a worldwide number. I don't see it being a whole lot bigger. I doubt this game was some smashing success here. This is one of those games that you can find out and about. You can find copies online. I wouldn't necessarily call it common though, but that's probably because it's more on Saturn than anything.
I was curious about the arcade. I'm trying to find arcade numbers because, like, again, just trying to find an image of the actual cabinet's not super easy. There's one little video, but he doesn't pan out and show everything.
That might be a byproduct of this. What I want to talk about specifically is competition. So fighting games, like I said to start this episode, they were huge at the time. And then whether you're in America or in Japan, this came out in 95, 96. I'm going to just list a few names. Tell me if y'all heard of any of these. Mortal Kombat 3,
Yes.
Tekken 2,
Yes.
Soul Edge,
Yes.
Street Fighter Alpha,
Yes.
King of Fighters 95,
Yes.
Marvel Superheroes,
Yes.
and the PlayStation competition is Battle Arena Toshinden.
I know of it, but it's not very popular.
That was in 95. So 96, our American audience is what it's went against. Street Fighter Alpha 2, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, a newcomer to the fighting landscape called Dead or Alive, Street Fighter EX, which was their foray into
Dead or Alive was 96?
first season 1,
Wow.
Street Fighter EX, which was the jump to 3D for Street Fighter, King of Fighters 96, Virtual Fighter 3, and Tekken 3. That's a
Tekken
hell of a
3?
lineup.
Tekken 3?
96, baby.
Shit.
But that's comparing every PlayStation, arcade. Let's just talk about Saturn. Here's the problem. Arguably better fighting games available right out the bat. You had the Virtua Fighter games, which are a little different. They're 3D, but you had X-Men Children of the Atom that came out at the same time, which Kazuhiko Nagai is one of the best Capcom fighters of the time. So it had a lot going against it.
What platform was that on?
PlayStation, Saturn, and arcade.
Okay.
So there was stiff competition in its own little landscape as well, which is the problem with this game. And Sega had their hand in almost all of those, so Sega was almost competing against herself in a lot of ways. The thing is, Sega was killing it at the time in the arcade during this. Virtua Fighter, people forget now because it's a little outdated. It was taking over arcades. It was the second most popular arcade game at that time. Street Fighter was the only thing more popular than it. And as far if you compare 3D, 2D, they were the kings of 3D by far. Tekken was still breaking in. We got Tekken 3, which people consider more of a console home game than an arcade game.
And that was the one that started putting the tide towards Tekken also. Like, 1 and 2 were successful, but 3 is what really started tipping scales.
When they did these kinds of tournaments and competitions, were they on arcade cabinets or were they with home consoles?
Probably arcade chemists.
I would assume arcade.
Because I know now it's nothing like
Yeah.
that.
Now they don't care, and they have fight sticks and stuff. You can kind of do whatever. But very crowded landscape at that time for fighting games is the point I'm trying to emphasize on here. So as this one isn't as common as a find as let's say a Tekken 2 or whatever, like there was just so much competition in that landscape. I think it did directly impact people's thoughts and feelings about this game. Because yes, if you take this game, nice little surprise, it'll surprise you. You put it against those titles, it's like, where does it even fit?
I feel like trying to branch out with a brand new fighter in the 90s is the same idea as trying to branch out with a brand new platformer on the PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
Like the sea is so deep.
Yeah, and it might be a great little game, but like, where do you swim with whales?
Right.
Dude? We're talking some of the King of Fighters during that time was unbelievably good.
Uh-huh.
Street Fighter was milking it beyond all cylinders, but still putting out quality titles. Capcom, legendary of the time for fighting games. I mean, some of the best ever. Some of them are still in tournaments and stuff, for God's sakes. Like, so it's just kind of unfortunate timing, but I get why Sega would specifically try to do a 2D fighter, especially with a franchise that was fairly popular. We're talking, the 6th game in the franchise at this point. Fairly available online. You go to eBay, like, it's not a game that disappears. Kind of always count on finding one out there. You're going to pay the $20 difference is registration card. If your Saturn case is cracked like mine, or like that, you pay for condition for that little price, but it's surprisingly affordable for an exclusive Saturn game. The interesting note would be the Japanese version, where you get some sweet cover art that's a little different. It's only about $40 to $50, and that's with shipping. So that's kind of extremely cheap for that.
Do you know if there any difference between the Japanese and the US version?
Just the text.
Text?
Yep. No censoring.
How much is this disc only?
How much is an arcade cabinet?
They don't exist.
Literally can't even find one.
Can't even find a board.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I want to see it. I love looking at arcade, like the cabinets and the art and stuff on the side.
So it looks like you can get disc only for about $50, $60. It's not horribly expensive at all.
Looks like it's been trending up for the last couple of years. Even with the ups and downs of the times. Obviously, big old spikes.
Sure. And it looks like disc only Japan's basically the same price as complete. But you gotta think different CD shell case. You had normal CD style case versus your big old Saturn gaudy boy.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago it was a $40 game. But it's like, you're right. Like, it's in between really 100 and 120, depending. It's a little bit more of a jump up and down. But 1 to 120 isn't like a huge leap compared to 140.
Sure. So Barry, in your estimation, ultimately, Golden Axe of Duel, worth it or not?
This last one sold for $175.
I remember when this game was about that high. Because when I've been like
2 days ago.
Wow.
Ooh.
So full disclosure, this is a game I've been hunting for a very long time. And I just love Golden Axe. I mean, I've really had an art commission and stuff based on Golden Axe. So like, I really do adore like the look, the feel, the play of this franchise. I would like to own every single game from it. And Brian and I, game hunting together, found this one recently that I picked up. So
it's a little interesting. I feel like $100 is about right, but I'm seeing a little higher at the registration card, like $150.
Saturn kind of does that sometimes, though, where
It's
people
odd.
will overpay to get the goodies on a Saturn game. But
I am culprit of that.
I mean, yeah, how could you not be? Conditions, kind of everything on Saturn too.
Well, condition is everything on a Saturn with the booklets, because, like PlayStation 1 booklets trying to cram them into a jewel case, but then you've got a tall boy jewel case that they just don't make them anymore, so you can't really find replacements. So, and then some people don't want to buy the cheapy ones to swap. It's so weird. Some people think, like, I had this, you were there, I remember this, I had this problem when I went somewhere where I was buying a game, and this dude almost dropped it, and he goes, "Oh, almost dropped it," and I said, "That's fine. If you broke the case, I would have just swapped it for another one." He's like, "But it wouldn't have been original then." I'm like, it's still a Sega CD case.
You would
What do
never
you
know
mean?
unless I told you.
What do you mean? There's no there's no serial number on a Sega CD case. I don't care. I mean, if you want like OEM cases or PlayStation 2 that have the PlayStation logo in them or whatever, cardboard's a completely different story. But like plastic cases, you get a broken case, like I will buy a game with a broken front case, like, Golden Axe or whatever, as long as the book looks nice, it's still got the CD, that's nice, and the label's nice, and the back art's nice, I'll just swap the front. That's no big deal.
If I gotta pick one, that disc better be pretty.
I'll buy a $5 sports game and swap them out. I don't care.
I've got several copies of old sports games for this reason. Same. Unfortunately, I'm out of them because Golden Axe the Duel could use a swap. But all in all, Barry, what are your thoughts on the collectability aspect and pricing of this game?
I think $100 is a steal. I don't know why this game isn't more. I feel bad for this game with it came out a little bit too late. Mm-hmm. If they had made, maybe they rolled it back a little bit. They made a Golden Axe fighting game spin-off on the Genesis. I feel like it would have been a lot more popular, but I think the time frame that it came out, it was already so late. It was on the Saturn. This thing had to compete with the PlayStation 1 that was upcoming or already came out. I think the PS1 came out the year before.
Yeah, PS1 was out.
Cheaper system, an exponentially cheaper system than the Saturn. It was a Saturn exclusive. So I feel like if this game had came out simultaneously with the PlayStation 1, this one would be so much more expensive because of the scarcity. But I think it had too much to compete with. Nobody really cared too much about it. It was a franchise on the back end. There wasn't really anything past this point, right?
No, because Death Adder was the last beat 'em up, and we didn't get anything after this until Beast Rider for PS3, Xbox 360. So I mean,
yeah,
this was it.
That thing.
But people unfairly blame this game for killing the franchise.
So I don't think this game is the detriment of the franchise. I just think it came out at the wrong time for it. If it came out maybe 5 years earlier, or even 3 years earlier, before we even knew what a PlayStation 1 was going to be, I just think it came out a little bit too late. Kind of shot themselves in the foot for it. Game plays great. It looks great. The music is fine. It's not a bad game. There's just so much competition on the market. Mm-hmm. It one console, dying console. So I'm not. What's the word? I am surprised that it's not worth more. That's what I mean. I feel like $100 is pretty reasonable. And we've talked about this before. This is cheaper than Die Hard.
Yeah. And
Die Hard Arcade was an exclusive, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like I can't find a lot of... There's a Golden Axe up there for sale. If you don't really care about a registration card, whatever. Who's going to mail a registration card out? I guess if you want a complete, you can do that, but... This is an easy, addition to a Sega Saturn Complete Collection for a pretty cheap price.
For an actual Sega property.
For a Sega property. Also, yeah. The cover's bitchin'.
It's fucking awesome, dude. It looks... Honestly, it makes me want one. I had this in my hand and I gave it to Nate because I know he's a Golden Axe guy.
I was trying to figure out who the artist was and I can't.
It's dope. It looks like it's a Frazetta swipe. And it's interesting, too. All the regions have their own different box. Even the PAL version, it's not the best, but it's... stands out. It's bright orange and it's got a bunch of skulls and swords and stuff on it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's cool that there's actually 3 different variations also. It's up my alley as far as that goes too. Maybe a tease for a future episode.
I didn't get pricing for PAL. I'm sorry.
It's about the same.
Yeah.
Literally about the same.
Generally is.
So, of the 3, the North American release is the most expensive.
Right. Because
by a slim margin than PAL. So, I don't know. $100 is even if you tack on $10, $15 extra in shipping, $100 is really reasonable. There are some out there right now that are $120 for a registration card. I don't know. I think this is a great Sega Saturn piece to have. Being an exclusive, it's the only way you can play it. The only other option is arcade, and there's not a lot of arcade businesses out there that have this cabinet. So
cheaper than the 1-Up.
It is cheaper than the... Does the 1-Up come with others on it?
It's got Death Adder, which is the arcade only one. What's the big selling point?
I wish it had this on there. That would have been
cool. It did have this on there. It says
Death
Adder.
It's Golden Axe 1 and 2, Death Adder, Altered Beast, and something else.
It doesn't have the Duel?
Nope.
Hold up.
The only way to play this game is buy the Saturn version or find the cabinet. Caught myself.
Look at you catching yourself.
Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder, Shinobi, Altered Beast, and Wrestle War.
Wow, I thought it was all Golden Axe stuff.
Nope.
So even more of a point, this is the only way you can really play it unless you have an actual arcade cabinet or you guys go sailing.
I mean, the port's great too. There's no slowdown or anything.
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's the thing.
At all.
A lot of times the arcade version's it's just so much, superior, but I've never played the arcade version, but there's no issues here. The load times maybe, but
I don't
Yeah,
think
there was a
they weren't
load time. The load
atrocious.
time to load the fight was a smidge long,
Yeah.
but it's not anything I haven't experienced, like loading into the tower in Destiny 2.
It's not Children of Adam on PlayStation where literally between round 1 and then it waits 30 seconds and it says fight and it waits another 30
Oh,
seconds.
man.
Yeah, it's
I don't feel like
Yeah.
they were egregious. They were like noticeable, but
No.
not offensive.
right.
I just think this is a great game that came out at the wrong time, that was overshadowed by heavy hitters that have already established in a fighting community. Golden Axe is not established in a fighting community, and they did try to do something different, which I can appreciate for doing a spin-off, but they're competing against, multi-generation fighting games that have an established crowd. You're not going to pull the Street Fighter people to Golden Axe with this.
No.
And so they probably saw it as like, oh, cool, that guy's over there on the Street Fighter cabinet. I'm gonna go try this Golden Axe for a little bit, but they're just playing it to wait to play Street Fighter
Yeah.
or Mortal Kombat. So they didn't have the established base, didn't have the longevity of the series and the franchise because of the time it came out. I mean, Sega died with the Saturn and the Dreamcast. Like, they didn't put anything out on the Dreamcast for Golden Axe.
Fortunately not.
So I don't know. I don't think this game killed the franchise. I just think
No, Sega did when they put 3 as a PAL exclusive, but that's fine.
Sega killed Sega.
yeah, Sega killed Sega.
Brett screwed Brett. Sorry.
You
Yeah.
got it.
I
I
mean, what'd
agree.
you think?
I agree with everything you're saying, though. This is it's a Sega Saturn exclusive. If you look at other ones, they're always going to be significantly higher. Sega property. The box art's amazing. Like, it's so up my alley. It's not even funny. And then honestly, for me personally, learning that this is not a 3D fighter, it's kind of what always turned me off from it. It makes me want it even more. Honestly, I'm personally just a sucker for this era of fighting games. I love the Neo Geo, and this felt like kind of playing a Neo Geo game. So I really want one of these, especially at an affordable price point. Like, I want one. I'll say worth it.
I'll get my thoughts really quick here. So you look at other comparable titles of the time on the Sega Saturn. Brought up Marvel Superheroes earlier. It's a $180 game. Children of Adam is over $100. Like, well over. I want to say Children of Adam is around $150 to $180. This is sitting there just squeaking it at $100. To me, it's just as great quality as those games. Like,
More of those sold too.
oh yeah, there's way
Guaranteed.
more copies of them out there. Like, to me, this is a no-brainer for $100, $120. Like, now I'm a little biased. I love Golden Axe, so like, this is one I've been wanting for a really long time. Like, when I first got my Saturn, I was like, I'm looking for this game. I finally got one. I paid a lot less than that for it, but like, all in all, yeah, I mean, exclusive Saturn game, that should be like, pique your interest in that alone. It's only $100. That should really pique your interest. Classic Sega property, which like, if Sega ever does start bringing their properties back, like, you'd have to consider Golden Axe being one of them. I don't know if they're going to, but it'd be on the short list. I feel like it's got a lot going for it. It's from a classic time that aged very gracefully too. So
I was going to say really quick, these screenshots on the back of the box do this game no justice whatsoever.
No, they look like doo-doo.
Yeah, don't trust these screenshots. They look not great. The game looks beautiful. Again, it's so weird to see so much negativity surrounding this game. Like, I don't want to say blown away because it's a solid game, but visually, like, no question, like, it's cool just to look at.
I would be curious to see what this looked like on a CRT.
But it looks amazing.
I mean, we played it on a flat screen on an upscaler, and it looked great.
Yeah,
So
but it looks shit.
I feel like this game got a really unfair judged against stuff. And I feel like this is a very solid game. This isn't going to like reinvent the wheel as far as fighting games, but it's
Right.
a product that came out during the Golden Age, and it feels like a Golden Age game, honestly.
I feel like it was an A+
Yeah.
first time series fighting game spinoff. You got what, Final Fantasy's spinoff fighting game? Dissidia? Garbage. I lied. The ones on the PSP were good, but they turned it to garbage. But there's tons of other franchises that have tried spin-offs, and they're not good. And so for Golden Axe to take something that fits so well into the world already and just convert it into a fighter and then execute it well, I feel like it's a very successful game.
People go out of their way to shit on this game, and I do not understand it.
That's what I'm saying. It's a respectable game that has a bad rep unnecessarily.
Worth it,
This is
stamp.
not Street Fighter.
Worth it.
I'm not a Street Fighter guy. I don't dislike Street Fighter. I just never got into it, but this is 100% worth it in my opinion.
Agree.
Thanks for sitting through that one, guys. Talk about what's next for the Collecti-Bros. I'm going to pass the question off to Brian. Right? It's Brian's episode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brian, what's next for us?
We got a little teaser talking about these variant covers for this game, but the next episode is going to be variant packaging, variant boxes, variant disc, just variants, different way to collect, why it's fun to collect for them, what we like, what we don't like about them.
The real nitty gritty.
The nitty gritty of collecting versus an addiction.
When that variant shoots your price up from being $200 to $800.
Yep. Or it's just an ugly player's choice, but we'll get into that.
It's a fun topic that we all kind of dabble in to a little bit of a degree, so some more than others, right, Brian?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to talk about that one with everyone. Appreciate all your time listening. Thank you. From Oppressed Gamers to the most oppressed group.
Go forth in our oppression. Collect the games. Publicly oppressed. Stay strong, fellow oppressees.
Keep
the
it
gamers.
real. Keep it real and keep collecting. Thank you guys. Have a good one.